I think there's the common perception that much of the repression of social movements has occurred because of September 11th, but actually these plans were in place long before then. Corporations have been using this rhetoric since the 1980s, and the terrorist attacks of September 11th were used as an opportunity to push their agenda and to target protest. The entire idea of eco-terrorism was actually invented by corporations, and they've used that rhetoric repeatedly in media campaigns, in lobbying members of Congress, and to inject that language into all levels of our discussion about how we talk about animal rights and the environment. I think the animal rights and environmental movements are one of the main targets of this repression for two reasons. One is that they're directly targeting corporate profits, and they're doing it more effectively and more directly than other social movements. They're doing it through their protests and also through the changes in lifestyles that they're advocating. The second reason, I think, is more philosophical or more cultural. It's that these movements are challenging very deeply held beliefs about what it means to be a human being. They're not just questioning specific policies, they're urging us to rethink our relationships with animals and with the natural world, and to some people in power that's very threatening. I started making the comparison between the Red Scare and the Green Scare because I simply thought it would be a way to explain what's going on right now in a way that most people in the United States would identify with and understand. But as I became more immersed in the issue, I really saw striking parallels that are nearly identical between those eras and between many other times in world history as well. And so I'm not arguing that what's happening today is exactly the same as what happened then, but I think by shining a light on the way these policies are being enacted, it helps us better understand it in a historical context. I think the best compliments I've received about this book are people who have said that they felt comfortable giving it to their parents or their siblings. I think it's often really uncomfortable for us to have political discussions about these issues with people that are closest to us. So my hope and my goal in writing this book is to create something that activists feel comfortable spreading with people that they care about who are not involved in political issues, and that they can be exposed to it as well. Historically, we've talked about these concepts as state repression, as repression from governments against the people in social movements. I would argue we need to start shifting our understanding and thinking of these as more corporate repression. The state is clearly still a key factor in all of this around the world, but increasingly we're seeing a very heavy influence by corporations on these policies and on these agendas. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a global conspiracy of everyone sitting down at one table thinking about how to demonize these protest groups. But there doesn't have to be, because these tactics are very fluid and they're being directly applied from one country to the other. I think it's important to remember that the entire purpose of all of this language, of the idea of eco-terrorism, of these new laws, is to make people afraid. It's to instill fear in protesters and in people who are thinking about becoming protesters. And so I would encourage anyone who's watching this right now or reading the book, it's okay to acknowledge that fear, but what's most important is that we move beyond it, that we recognize what people in power are trying to do, and that we get active and organize in our communities and speak out against this fear. It's no coincidence that the same tactics we've seen in the United States are appearing in Spain. The common element between all of these, between the persecution that activists have faced in the United States and the persecution of activists with animal equality in Spain, is that they've been incredibly effective. In just a few years, animal equality investigations have gotten national and international headlines, national television news, and is completely changing how we talk about animal protection. And to the businesses and industries that are being exposed, that's a direct threat. And that's why we're seeing this eco-terrorism language being used for the first time against them. If there's one lesson to be learned throughout US history and world history about eras where the government has targeted protest groups, is that it's never limited to one group of people. What we're seeing now with the animal rights and environmental movement are tactics that are spreading to other social movements as well. So it doesn't matter how you feel about animal rights or the environment. It doesn't matter how you feel about the activists who I talk about in my book, or even how you feel about animal equality or groups around the world. What it's important to realize is that these tactics, if we allow them to continue, will be used against other social movements and will be used against causes that you care about as well. That's what we're seeing take place in the US and around the world.